Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our PatternFly demo. This demo happens for our community members every couple of weeks, rotating between 9 a.m. EST and 11 a.m. EST. After the meeting today, I'll post this on our YouTube channel. So if you know of anyone who might be interested, please go ahead and share it out so they can stay in the loop. And if any questions come up after today's demo, if you will please go ahead and post those questions to the forum. That link is in our demo agenda today, which I've posted in the chat. And we'll go ahead and get started. So first we're going to cover some updates to docs, and Matt is going to start us off with Inline Alert.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. Let me share my screen out. This should be pretty quick. Let me see. There we go. So during the sprint, I made some updates to the inline, the alerts and notifications design guidelines page. This is currently still to be merged. It's there's an open PR up, which I've linked in the agenda. So if folks want to take a look at that PR and comment, you're very welcome to do so. But the changes I made are pretty straightforward. We're adding a new inline alert style. Formerly, the alerts only came in this toast notification style with the drop shadow. So this new inline styling, and I think Sarah Rombacher is going to demonstrate the corresponding code change a little bit later on in this demo. But so I just added the, you can see now an alert can be in either one of these styles, but they have consistent elements. So functionally, they are the same. But I did also add a note here that for the inline alerts, they can also contain active elements. So this is an example where you could include radio buttons in an alert if you want, in an inline alert if you wanted to use this to prompt the user for feedback. And that's pretty much it. Any questions about that? Okay, then I'm going to turn it back over to Rachel.
Great, thanks, Matt. And Gina's going to cover some updates to charting.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, and sorry, I'm having blue jeans problems. So hopefully I can do this.
If you want to post the link, and okay, you got it.
Did I get it? Okay, good.
Yeah, you got it.
Thanks. So I have been working on charts documentation. There's been a lot of updates with chart colors and just like general chart updates, I would say. And so this one specifically talks about donut charts. And last time we had this meeting, I presented the donut charts with threshold design. And this just goes through the different types of charts that we'll have. So we'll have the normal standard donut chart, which looks like this. And the beginning, we'll just go through all the important elements of donut charts. And then as you keep going, we'll talk about donut utilization, which is the chart that's designated for tracking utilization. And then we'll have a donut utilization with threshold chart. That will be a variation of the utilization one. And then documentation about how to use that and just the standards of that. And it's a work in progress right now. So if you see anything that you'd like me to add or anything like that, please comment on it and I will. And that's all.
Great, thanks so much, Gina. Mary is going to cover on visual side the responsive behavior of utility menus.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I had my microphone off. there for a second. Okay, so I took a look at the utility items in kind of two different perspectives. So something that we talked about was that the bell, which is where notifications are housed, should always be present, even in responsive views, so that you can see if you have unread notifications or not, because if they're critical, there might be something that should be always visual to you. So first I'll cover the bell interaction, since that's a little bit different from the rest of them, since that's the only one that always stays there. So let me zoom in a little bit. Okay. So on desktop, it just is laid out that you have your standard masthead with the bell and the blue icon, or the blue dot that would indicate if you have unread notifications or not. And then you could have several different utility icons. So you could, here we just have the gear for settings, but you could have, the eye icon for information, or question mark, whatever else, whatever your product has, those would all line up in that section, with the bell being the leftmost item. And then this just goes over a little bit of the interaction of that. So once you drop down to tablet, everything, all the icons except for the bell would be housed in the kebab. The notification drawer still works the same as it would. Then on mobile, everything, including the avatar symbol, is also that is just dropped, because as of right now, that's a static image that's not clickable. So the login information would also be housed in the kebab. And now I'll go over a little bit of how a little bit more complex part of how that kebab functions. So again, we see it as we did before. This time, we're taking a look at the interaction of a utility item. So it works as you would expect it would on desktop, where you would click on whatever utility item. We could, again, have a situation where we have several of them here. Then you would get a menu drop down. But then once you go to tablet, this is where it gets a little bit more funky. So if you wanted to access one of those utility items that's now hiding behind a kebab, you would click on that kebab, and then we get an accordion. So rather than having several different layers of menus, since each of these now that were the utility items in the username selector, those now, it's a menu that has menus inside of it, so we figured that would be a good way to utilize the accordion. So you would select the one that you're looking for, and then it would drop down with whatever would typically be housed in the menu section of that original either username or utility item. And has the same styling as every other accordion. So really nothing custom except for having a divider line to create some hierarchy and draw more attention to the username, since that section is usually separated out from the utility items anyway. It makes sense to carry that through into the responsiveness. So that is about it for this. If you felt like taking a look at some more of the specifics of this, or some questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to me. I think that's it.
Great. Thank you, Mary. And Michael Solidonia is going to cover forms updates.
Thanks, Rachel. We've got a few updates to forms I can go over here. So I've got contractors at my house, so sorry for the noise in the background. So the first thing I wanted to go over with forms that I wanted to just talk about is I'm showing forms now with a new font. With that font upgrade on the horizon, I just thought it'd be good to show how it looks with forms because it's such a pervasive component. But as far as actual just kind of updates with this story, and a kind of amendment that I want to show is that for these tooltip icons, we're actually going to be using an info icon. I've got a question mark here, but we're going to go with the little I in the circle instead of the lowercase I instead of the question mark. But just showing the spacing there and how that works when you've stacked it with a required field asterisk. It just kind of stacks right next to it. And this is because we want you to be able to the reason it's there is because with a screen reader, we want you to be able to get right to it right after you hit that label. So it'll go label, info tip, field, and then we've also showing how a caption would work as well. So you see here on the right, I'm showing how placeholder text works. We're still going to recommend against placeholder text pretty strongly in most cases. And the reason for that is because it's just not, it ends up not being very usable in terms of, especially in terms of accessibility, because that text goes away when you enter the field. But we do want to offer a solution for people who will, insist on having it. And the kind of problem with placeholder text is that it's not very accessible, like I said, that it goes away. Also, the color contrast is never going to be enough. If you increase that color contrast, it looks like it's text that's already just been inputted, and you can't really tell the difference between inputted text. So what we decided to do was go with the solution, which is kind of a trade-off, but it's a good solution that is accessible for those people who want it, where you've got your placeholder text, and when you click in the field, that placeholder text all of a sudden becomes our primary text color. And your cursor is still at the beginning, and when you start typing, that placeholder text disappears, and you get the first letter of what you typed. But what that allows us to do is have the placeholder text actually be accessible one way or another. Of course, it is a little bit of a trade-off because it is kind of weird that it's a primary text color. But I think after some use, just getting used to that going away, it'll be fine. And again, that's something we're really recommending against, but we wanted to provide a solution for anyways. So here you can see I've typed. Another thing I did was update the blue colors in our forms. That's something we need to do across the whole system, but just showing it looks really nice with our new blue. And then showing how a popover would work. So I've actually got a tooltip here. This is another amendment that I have to make. We're going to go with a full popover for these. So instead of hover, you're going to click on it, and then you're going to be able to have a lot more rich content in there. So you'll be able to have buttons, links, stuff like that for your info tips. Another thing to point out is the error text. So when you've got an error on a field, we've got the icon that comes up, and then what happens is the caption text, if there is caption text, gets replaced by the error text. So I tried to kind of convey that here with this really abstract example. So your phone number should be this and that, and then the phone number you entered wasn't this and that. So the information that is required to fill out that form is not getting lost with the error text. So being sure to include that same information that's vital to filling out that field in the error text, as you can see here, this and that being the kind of vital information. So the next thing I want to talk about, spacing. So I made a slight update to the spacing where we used to have 32 pixels between each field, and we're dropping that down to 24. It feels a lot more cohesive. The 32 looking back feels a little bit spacey, kind of floaty. That's kind of also a part of a larger effort across the whole system to bring down the spacers a little bit. And we actually end up getting about a whole another field's worth of space by doing that, which is pretty awesome. Okay, next big thing to point out, which is kind of part of a different story, but it's a recommended max width. So this isn't going to be something we force people. You can't go beyond this width. It's just a recommendation for a max width. And when we were trying to figure out how to decide that max width, we decided to go with the same way that we would determine a max width for a text field or a body of text, which is a recommended line length, which is a kind of common thing in typography overall, both print and web, where you don't want lines to be too long, because when they're too long, it makes it really, if you've got a full page line, it makes it very difficult to come back to the next line when you're done with that long line and recalibrate sort of. So if you have lines that are too long, you might notice yourself skipping to the wrong line after you finish that line. And that's just a big thing to avoid. So about 75 characters is what is generally recommended. There's a big range, but 75 is kind of right in the middle. And what that allows us to do is if we measure that with our text, we get about 464 pixels. So in a field, this is what it looks like. And again, this is just a recommendation. If you need to have something longer than that because you've got a really long like URL or file path or something that you want to be able to see all of, you can totally do that. This is just kind of a recommendation. And the reason for that is to avoid, we want to avoid situations like this where we've got just a form going across the whole page because it's just misleading, I guess, in terms of the information that you want to input. In general, you want your form fields to be about the length of the content that you're inputting. Obviously, sometimes that's not possible, but when it is possible, you want to try to do that. So this is kind of what it looks like. You might say, well, we've got a lot of empty space now, but overall, if you don't have any content to put there, that's okay. You don't have to fill up every inch of space on the form, especially when it's a form with inputs that just don't need to be that long. So we're still kind of working through this. So if you've got any feedback or information, definitely throw it up on the GitHub issue. We'd love to hear from you because we're still kind of figuring this out, but this is kind of our general approach. One thing I kind of forgot was multiple controls and inputs on the same line. So we're going to offer our standard form component for stuff like this, and then instruct people to use probably a grid layout or a flex layout to achieve something like this, where you've got 2 columns or 3 columns or however many columns you want. And that's just for those kind of forms where, you can imagine this would be a very long form if they were all on their own line. And for things like city and state, state's just generally an abbreviated thing, phone number, things like that don't need to be that long. So we save a lot of space by going with a multi-column layout. And then just showing how things look with left labels. So I know that was a lot and I kind of jumped back and forth everywhere, but that's pretty much it. It was just a bunch of small updates here and there with forms. Cool. Sorry again for the noise. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thanks so much, Michael. Moving on to CSS, Michael Coker is going to cover modifying layout gutter size on mobile.
Hey, just a sec. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, this is a pretty quick update. We have a few layouts. Specifically, I have a list here. It's the grid, the gallery, the level, the split, and the stack that support a gutter modifier that puts a gutter between elements. So this is an example of a grid layout. And the gutter size was fixed previously in responsive desktop mobile views. We just updated it so that in a mobile view, the gutter spacer is less than it is on desktop. It uses our medium spacer, which is the same spacer that the page section uses for padding around the elements in, say, this box, around the navigation and the header, that sort of thing. So you can see it shift just slightly at that breakpoint so that the spacer between elements that have a gutter layout matches like the space above and below matches the space that exists on the left and the right of the page layout, that sort of thing. That's it.
Great, thanks, Michael. And Sarah is going to cover Inline Alert.
Okay, share my screen. Okay, so Matt already talked about what Inline Alert is. What I've implemented is just what he showed. It just is the same structure as a regular alert, same HTML structure, with a modifier to say that it's inline, which gives it, the different visual appearance. And it's just the PFM inline modifier. All the variations as far as having links and close buttons or action buttons all still work just fine. And that's it, not much to it.
Great, thanks, Sarah. All right, and Christy's going to add a couple of enhancements to CSS.
Hey everyone. So something I worked on this week was the CSS variables for charts. And so basically this took what Michael Celedonio and Gina have been working on for colors with charts. So now we have these variables in CSS that can be used in React. And so you'll see here that the hex color denotes a new color that we didn't have in our global colors already. But these colors down here were already in our global colors already. They just weren't assigned yet. So that should be in there. And then for the next sprint, I'm going to be working on the rest of the variables for charts, like borders and paddings, etc. This issue is to do with hyphens in CSS. Basically, it looks at how to handle word wrapping. For example, you can see this really long word, wizard, here. It breaks to the next line, but this is like poor typography because usually a hyphen would denote that the word has broken to the next line. So I've been investigating how hyphens can be used in CSS, and I've written a lot in here, but basically the browser right now handles when a word will wrap and add a hyphen, and basically you would set the language in the HTML code, and then that would happen there. But ideally, there's a CSS text level 4 spec, which isn't implemented yet, but that would allow us to set a hyphen and to break a word on however many characters are in the word. So we could say like a 15-character word would wrap and add a hyphen, which would be ideal. Anyway, so I've added a lot of content here. If anyone's passionate about typography and good type on the web, that would be really good to have a look. And then for the website, this sprint, here we used to have a switch, which would switch from React to HTML, but I replaced that with an extension of our React PatternFly for React Select. And so now you can switch between HTML and React like that. And then I worked on styling the search for the CSS variables to match the rest of our searches in here. So it's basically the same as what we have on the icons page. And then Adam has been working on the search up here too. So now they're all consistent. And that's all for me.
Great, thanks, Christy. Joachim's going to cover Google Analytics on the site.
Hello. Okay. Yeah, so the first one is for the patternfly.org/before website. And you can see that if you go to Google Analytics, we've added that domain, and it shows up all the various Google Analytics that you would hope for, I guess. User behavior, and lots of other stats. So that's been added. Okay, that's it for the website, I guess. Should I cover the React section?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. So for the tabs component, it used to work that you would have these scroll buttons, but there was a regression and it stopped working for a while. So I just made that work again, set it back in. You can see it working right here. And then that same behavior was also added to the nav. So that was a new feature addition for the nav. If you have a horizontal or tertiary navigation, you also see the scroll buttons. But I did just realize that there's probably one behavior that hasn't been covered yet, which is if you click something and then do a manual scroll, I guess it doesn't give you the indicator that it's been scrolled out of view. So maybe something to add soon. That's it.
Great, thanks, Joachim. All right, that's the end of our agenda for today. Any questions for our team members before we hop off? Okay, thank you everyone for attending. I'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks all.